Some of you might have seen this, and this is a schematic. It has made its way around of all the areas in America that have submitted an application stating that they are the exact perfect next place for Amazon's second headquarters. Have you seen this picture? This is it. Every red dot represents someone in America who thinks they're perfect for this. This is the crux of why you're here and what we're about. I mean, it literally is. For those of you who didn't get your glasses on in time, this is just little red dots covering every square inch of America. This is what everybody would like to believe. It's what everybody needs and wants. And workforce development and what we are or are not doing to get people ready for 21st century America is really the purpose for why you're here. I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for your willingness to step up, for your willingness to serve, for your willingness to give back. Education is everything. You know this. You've been talking for the last number of sessions about what some of the goals are, not only for CPE here in Kentucky, but frankly for your individual institutions and for academics in the world of post-secondary academia in particular, in America as a whole. This is a whole nother world. I mean, I'm being a little bit master of the obvious in stating this to you. I'm struck here. I see Jay Morgan here, a new president at Morehead State University, and as close as many of you are probably aware of the things that are happening on that campus with CubeSats. A lot of the technology, there are 6 different satellite systems that have been designed and built on that campus that are now somewhere circling over the earth. And I was thinking of that, this is as close as I'm going to ever get to being such a satellite. But there's a lot that happens here in Kentucky. There's things you know about, things you don't know about. Some of you are new to your respective positions. Some of you have been serving for years and years. Thank you to each and every one of you for your willingness to do it. The message I have to you, I was speaking with Bob even before I came up here and saying, are there particular themes or thoughts or things you'd have me say? Some of you are probably aware I don't tend to write things out in advance. There's a lot that I have that I would like to share with you, some of which I will. But I wanted to see, are there certain things that I should touch on? And we discussed a little bit of some of the things that have been shared in earlier sessions. The goal of having by 2030 60% of Kentuckians with some kind of post-secondary education, certainly an admirable goal. But I would submit to you that it's not aggressive enough, and yet I don't want to second guess it and say that we should change it. I hope we blow the doors off that number. We need to blow the doors off that number because every other state in America is trying to do the same thing. An important thing to bear in mind, you think about this, since the downturn, since the Great Recession, as it is often referred to, and the economy as it has started to pick up since that time over the last 10 years or so, a little less, there have been in America 11.6 million jobs that have been created. 11.6 million jobs. 11.5 million of those jobs require some form of post-secondary education. So the fact of the matter is there is not in the 21st century much, if any, opportunity, and an increasingly small subset of opportunity for people with truly no post-secondary education. What that looks like, exactly what the path is to attain it, these are things yet to be determined. These are things that you literally, as the directors who will be responsible on these various boards at your respective institutions, to determine this, to set policy. The message I want to leave you with is to be bold, to be creative, to have a sense of vision, the likes of which perhaps you have as a twinkle in the eye, but I want you to bring it forward and to push the envelope on things, the likes of which you've perhaps never done. For you university presidents, I want you to do things creatively, innovatively, efficiently, outside the box in ways that you've never done anywhere you've ever been prior to the job you're in now, and perhaps not even in the job you're in now. It's been said, and many of you have heard it quoted, that without vision the people will perish. It is very true. The same is true for any organization. The same is true for a nation and for a state, certainly for an institution of higher learning. for the whole idea of post-secondary education in America as well. Without vision, the people will perish. What is your vision? What is the vision that each and every one of you have for your individual institution? Both individually, as members, what is your vision? But what is it that you, in sharing with your fellow board members, can collectively come up with as something that's not just a twinkle in the eye, but something you can actually do? And I would encourage you to be aggressive, because other states are, as has been noted, and you've looked at benchmarking of what some others are doing, other states have a sense of urgency as well. Abraham Lincoln, who is famously from here, and we know that, and is famous for having said many things, and we know that. One thing I'm betting a number of you probably have never heard attributed to him, which I think is one of his greatest quotes. He said, "Good things may come to those who wait, but only the things left behind by those who hustle." Isn't that a great quote? Just the idea of Abraham Lincoln saying hustle. It's kind of cool in its own right. But think about that. It's true enough. Good things may come to those who wait, but only the things left behind by those who hustle. Hustle. This is my challenge to you. Hustle like you have never hustled. We have, and some of the things were alluded to by Ben in the intro, put in place in the last months. I've been governor now for 18 months and change. Feels like 18 years and change, but we're getting a lot of things done. And you all are helping us do it. But in this short bit of time that we've been here, we have put into place certain initiatives, some of which very much affect the world of post-secondary education. We've got to change this paradigm, the entire mindset of what post-secondary education looks like and how folks get themselves on track to it has got to change. It is the number one issue. I spoke earlier this morning. In fact, some of your speakers who have been here are now down this afternoon speaking at an apprenticeship summit here in the city. And our Secretary of Labor, Derek Ramsey, has convened this summit. We have people from the national and other state levels that are speaking at that and talking about what is it at the secondary level that we're doing to put kids onto an on-ramp where at any one of your institutions they have the ability to be successful. You know the statistics. You've talked about them, I'm sure. 60% of all kids graduating from high school, the very same goal that we want by 2030, and that I absolutely affirm what CPE is asking for, that we need to have 60% of Kentuckians with some kind of post-secondary education and certification and degrees by 2030. But what's interesting is that right now, 60% of all kids coming out of our high schools immediately go on to some kind of post-secondary education. 3 out of 5. Guess how many of them, even as many as 6 years later, have attained any level of certification that they went down the path to get? 20%. 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5. So 2/3 are moving out, 60% of them, out of high school, moving out into the world of post-secondary education. But only 1/3 of that 2/3 comes out the other end of the tunnel. Something's breaking down somewhere. And I would submit to you that there's several parts to it. It's not just the tunnel itself that you all are responsible for. It's who's at the front end, who's directing people into the tunnel. There's more than one tunnel. Who's directing people into the right tunnel? What knowledge of the tunnels, to stretch this analogy that may not be a good one, but what knowledge of a 21st century's tunnel actually exists, not only among those of us responsible for the tunnel itself, but for the people that are at the front end feeding in. We send our students on a lot of field trips, and that's great. But I'll tell you what, it would be fantastic if more parents went on field trips, even more critically, if more principals went on field trips, if guidance counselors went on field trips, if superintendents went on field trips to the very same places that we're sending our students. Because 21st century America and the 21st century American workforce is like nothing that any of us grew up in. It just isn't. It's an entirely different world. We need to change this paradigm, as I alluded to a moment ago, so that we start thinking less about a K through 12 kind of a on-ramp and more of a K through 14, because it is not going to be possible in the 21st century to not have some type of post-secondary education. Some of that will result in degrees. Increasingly, that's going to have to result, especially for folks for whom a degree may not be an option or an interest. in some kind of certification, some kind of modular certification, something that's stackable is a term that you hear, something that can be built upon. There is just a few miles east of here, maybe 15, 20 miles down the road in Shelbyville, there is a company that produces some of the most high-tech components in the aviation industry that exists today. The Boeing Dreamliner, arguably the most advanced commercial aircraft being produced in the world, certainly in America. The ribs of those aircraft, which are made of titanium and are fabricated in a way that wasn't even conceivable just a short time ago, the ribs of those aircraft, which cost in excess of $10,000 a piece, and of which there are many, as you would imagine, in an aircraft of that size, are all made right up the road here in Kentucky. The guy who oversees that entire production line for that component came out of high school in Kentucky and did not go to college. What's interesting is that he was always very mechanically inclined, was always very intrigued by the possibility of fabricating, thinking boldly and creatively. But for him, for any number of reasons, he did not go on to post-secondary school. 10 years later, he did. 10 years later, he did. He has at least one, and I think a couple, advanced degrees now in engineering. He has ultimately had to learn things that he could not have learned just simply by hands-on. This is where we all come in. So what do those feeders look like? What do those on-ramps look like? What does the tunnel, and how many of them do they exist? What do those look like? And what is success when we have people coming or not coming out the other end of the pipeline? And I'll tell you, in some measure, it's simple. We talked a moment ago about vision. My vision for this state, and I think a number of you have heard me express this. If you've not, I'll tell you what it is. It's a simple one. I will say this. Let me back up and ask you all a question. If you wanted to engineer and manufacture something, 21st century level engineering and manufacturing, you needed to do it to the highest degree of excellence, with the highest degree of sophistication and a surety of quality. And you had to do it in continental Europe. You had to do it somewhere in continental Europe. Where would you likely start? Germany. 100% of the time, that's the only answer I get. Does that mean you could not engineer and manufacture something to an unbelievable degree of excellence in Switzerland, or Belgium, or France, or Italy? Of course not. You could. No question about it. But why is it that Germany, 100% of the time, it's the first answer that comes to people's minds? Why is that? Is it because they're the only ones that can do it? No. It's because they have developed a program over the course of decades, through apprenticeship, through training, through interface between the high school and the secondary and post-secondary worlds, through dialogue between not only those worlds of academia, but the business community as well, with respect to what they really do need and want. What is it that they're actually searching for? What is going to allow somebody to become employable? That level of dialogue has created an environment in which Germany is instinctively the first name that we think of. If I were to ask you the same question, if you wanted to engineer and manufacture something in the 21st century to the absolute highest degree of excellence, you had to do it in a single state in America, what state would first come to mind? I would bet in this room we'd get easily 10 or 15 distinct and different answers. Every single one of them is able as the other to justify why they have suggested that state. I would hope Kentucky might be off the tongue of some of you, but truth be told, others of you might say Indiana or Tennessee or Texas or Florida or Georgia or North Carolina or fill in the blank. And every single one of those states would be as defensible as the others with respect to why you said it. So what this tells me is the following. If nobody owns it, it's available for ownership. And Kentucky is going to own it. Simple as that. My vision for Kentucky is that we become, bar none, the absolute center of engineering and manufacturing excellence in the United States of America. If, in fact, we become the center of engineering and manufacturing excellence, such that a generation from now, and hopefully a whole lot sooner, that if somebody were to stand here and ask a room full of people in this state or anywhere in America or anywhere in the world, if you had to go to America and you had to start in one state and you wanted to engineer and manufacture something to the highest degree of excellence, where would you start? I expect And your job is to help us deliver on the ability for whoever that room is asked, whoever's in that room, that they would instinctively say, well, obviously we'd have to start in Kentucky. That is absolutely doable. We are already well on our way to getting there. We are doing things that most people don't even realize. Our #1 export, some of you may know this, but I'm betting some in this room don't. The #1 export for this state is aerospace and engineered products for the aviation industry. #1 export, so much so that it is more than the next 4 combined, one of which is automotives that everybody would think of as being a big thing, which it is. And we make all the Super Duty trucks, we make all the Toyota Camrys and Avalons, we make Corvettes, we make a lot of products for the automotive industry that are front of the line, cutting edge technology, manufacturing, engineering coming together. And yet that and the next 3 behind it don't equal the amount that we're doing in the aerospace industry. I bet you some of you probably didn't even know that. We are well on our way. How do we harness this? How do we use every resource at our disposal? How do we marshal the expertise, the knowledge, and above all, the dedication of time that you're willing to bring to the equation to make sure that we accomplish this vision? How do we ensure that we become the center of engineering and manufacturing excellence in America? This is a simple vision, it's an attainable vision, and we're going to ultimately get it done. We have to get it done. Failure is not an option. Every single governor wrestles with, above all else, and we have plenty of things on our respective plates. And at times, certain states like Texas and Florida have things on their plates for periods of time that they wouldn't have wanted. And all of us certainly can appreciate that in recent weeks. But all these other extraneous things aside, the #1 pressing issue over and over and over again is workforce development. It's the quality of a workforce. An educated workforce, a 21st century workforce, a workforce with some kind of post-secondary education, qualification, certification, whatever the case might be. That is it. That's it. It's not that complicated. That is what will separate all those little dots on that map that I showed you. I mean, all those little dots where everybody thinks they're it. Where in America right now could an Amazon go with confidence and employ 50,000 people? Nowhere, to be honest with you. Nowhere. So every one of us is compelling, trying to come up with this compelling a case for how we can help them fill that in. But there is nowhere right now where that is a slam dunk, well, we'll go to X, Y, or Z place and that's where we'll get it done. Because it's a zero-sum game in some of the most immediately desirable places to go, where you're going to get those people, but it's going to come at the expense of the very community you're trying to become a part of and to integrate into. And this is one of the dangers when, and it's awesome. I mean, there may be people here who work for Ford or have worked for Ford, and I don't mean to single them out. I say this in praise to them. What they have done here in Louisville is unbelievable. The expansion, the level of sophistication, the production, engineering, and manufacturing quality is second to none, literally, in the world of trucks in the United States or worldwide. And yet, when they make an announcement that they're going to hire X thousands of more people, that sends a shudder through the offices of a whole lot of other companies who realize their engineers and their tool and die guys and their techs and their whatever the case might be are going to be likely getting pulled in the direction of a company like that. That is the nature of where we are. There is a huge shortage of qualified, trained people. This is your mission. How are we going to fill that gap? Simply having 60% by 2030 of Kentuckians with post-secondary certification and or degrees in and of itself is not enough if they aren't studying the right things. Simple as that. And so to that end, what is it that you as trustees, what is it that you as university presidents, what is it you as people who are in the legislature and or in positions of responsibility in the cabinets or whatever the case might be, what are each of you going to do to move the needle in a direction that takes us to accomplishing our vision, knowing that everyone else is a red dot somewhere in America trying to do some variation of the same thing? We are blessed by opportunities that other states don't have. We truly, right here in the middle of America, with the logistical hubs and capabilities of a UPS right here, and a DHL, their North American shipping hub, and one of the 3 largest in the world, just up the road where some of you serve. And the fact that we also have Amazon now building their Air Prime hub in their Prime Air hub here in Kentucky as well. We are the logistics center of America. We are where products that are engineered and manufactured somewhere are going to move through here. So why in the blazes shouldn't we be producing them here? And I say to the universities that have engineering programs, and a number of you do, if you have some of the top engineering programs, not only in the state, but in this region and in the country, and some of you do, why are we only putting, 50, 100, 200, 250 people out the door every year with these degrees? That's crazy. I would challenge you to say to yourselves, if we're graduating 250 people out of our engineering school, and it's a top engineering school in the country, and indeed such a thing exists in this very state and not too far from here, why is it 250 and not 1,000? And what are we going to do between now and 2030 and a whole lot sooner to make sure it's 1,000? We've got the caliber of people to teach them. Every single one of these kids coming out of these programs has 3, 5, 8, 10 jobs lined up that they get to pick from. And it isn't just those with 4-year engineering degrees. As has been discussed, I hope, and as time doesn't necessarily allow me now, but you've probably heard me discuss previously. We have a whole lot of these mid-level type jobs that pay $50,000 to $100,000 a year or more that may not even require a 4-year degree. What are we doing to prepare young people for this? And what are we doing to stop the perpetuation of this idea that simply having a degree is enough? There's a whole lot of kids sitting in their parents' basement and competing with people for jobs that are minimum wage or a bit better, who have 4-year degrees, some of them graduate level degrees, some from the very universities that you all represent. I would submit to you that we have failed those students in some respects. Some are kids who've not taken advantage of what we had offered to them, but some are kids that we have allowed, and the we is us collectively as Kentuckians, that we have allowed to follow a path that was not in their best interest. And where it started, whether it was in the 8th grade or whether it was when they finally got something to hang on the wall and however many dollars in debt to go with it, that nowhere between then and then, whether in their home or in the schools or in the community or wherever, nobody stepped in and said, maybe this isn't the right path for you. We do not need to perpetuate this idea that simply going to college is enough. It's not enough. It's why we have this work skills initiative in place. It's why we as a state have said, and people look at states nearby, and there's one that borders us that some years ago got a lot of publicity for saying we're going to give everybody 2 free years of post-secondary education. Fantastic, unless you're studying interdisciplinary studies. Not a lot of jobs looking for people with a degree in that. You're studying interpretive dance, God bless you. But there's not a lot of jobs right now in America looking for people with that as a skill set. And these are things that literally are offered even at some of the universities that are represented in this room. I once, perhaps you heard, made mention of French literature. I did that intentionally, knowing that not one of your universities confers a French literature degree. Certainly none of our public universities do. You would have thought every other person in Kentucky had a French literature degree by the reaction to that comment. But I do specifically mention these to realize it isn't anything against us. I have a degree in East Asian Studies. That would seemingly be remarkably non-applicable to things. But you put things in perspective. I got that degree. I was studying economics and business management in the mid-1980s when Japan was buying up Pebble Beach and Manhattan and everything in between, and the rise of Japan, and everybody was saying we're all going to be working for the Japanese, and it's the early to mid-80s, and I looked around and said, well, if we are, I'm going to make sure I speak Japanese. I understand how they think. I worked in that country, gone to school in that country, and understand the mindset so that I can be a step ahead. And so I changed my major, and I moved to Japan. I went to a university. I learned Japanese. Turns out they didn't take over the world, so we ducked that one. Now people are saying the same thing about the Chinese, and the same thing is true. There will always be somebody. It has ever been thus. What are we doing to prepare our young people in whatever the global environment is to be able to do jobs that matter and that are needed? We have 190,000 jobs right now that are unfilled in Kentucky, 190,000 jobs. Probably more than that. Those are the ones that are listed that we are aware of. We have 225,000 working-aged, able-bodied men and women in Kentucky who do not go to work every day. By choice. They don't have dependents either. 225,000. We've got to change the whole mindset of what we expect of people, what we demand of people, what we allow people to do as a lifestyle, but also making sure we are realistic with young people where they are. And the farther down we go into the pre-post-secondary world, the better. Not just wait until you're a senior and you're halfway through the year and you got to talk to the guidance counselor and I don't know what I'm going to do next year. I'm talking when you're a junior and a sophomore and a freshman and an 8th grader and a 6th grader, 7th grader, 5th grader, whatever the case might be. And I do realize I didn't do those in order, so just in case you know. But here's the thing. All the way down into middle school, we've got to start putting seeds. Seeds take time to germinate. I'll close with this. How many of you have ever raised a vegetable garden or worked on a farm? Or okay, a number of you. Okay. So this is for those of you who've grown a vegetable garden, for example, what's the fastest thing you can put in the ground and then actually eat? What's like the fastest thing you can grow? Anybody? Lettuce is a good call. Bib lettuce is actually very fast, even faster than that. Radishes, who said that? Radishes, Marty, well done. Here's the thing. You can grow a radish remarkably fast. If you've ever seen a radish seed, it looks like a little peppercorn. It's kind of a prickly little seed. It's a fairly big seed. You put it in the ground and you can get a radish pretty quickly. But let's be honest, who wants to eat a whole plate full of radishes? Nobody. I mean, nobody. If we're going for expediency, if we're going for the illusion that we're preparing people for something, then we're failing them. We need to think long term. We need to put seeds in the ground now that will germinate over the next 13 years. So that by 2030, we're not just simply raising radishes, but we've got melons and corn and beans and whatever the case might be that we want to eat. That's what we need to shoot for. So let me close with an exhortation of each and every one of you. Be bold. Break eggs. You will find, and it's interesting, it's created a little bit of angst among some and fear among others. I have put a whole lot of new people on these boards. That's not by accident. And I say this with all due respect to those of you who've been appointed to positions. Some of you are no more qualified and no smarter than the people whose positions you are replacing. You're not. But I'll tell you what, your fresh perspective, your fresh eyes, your fresh sense of urgency, and that's what I'm asking of you, because we can't afford the alternative. I'm asking you to use the time you have to shape the future of Kentucky's education system, to have a sense of urgency and a sense of purpose and a sense of foot on the gas. And if you find that you don't have that energy and you don't have that vision and you don't have that willingness to do whatever it takes, pass the baton. Pass the baton to someone who can. There is no shame in that. Every one of you is only able to be on this board because you have accorded yourselves in a way, I should say, that has made you rise above. You are noteworthy. You are exceptional. You are leaders already. But some of you only have a limited amount of bandwidth that you can do outside of your other responsibilities. If you don't have the ability to pour all into the task at hand, please pass the baton. But for those of you that do have that bandwidth, who have very thoughtfully approached this and said, I'm going to pour in, be all in. And for you university presidents, be bold. Be bold and break some eggs. I'm telling you what, the day of us having flush with dollars for education, you know what we're dealing with on the pension front. You know what we're dealing with on our budget front. These are challenging times. And yet we have brought $7.1 billion in new private capital invested in the state in the first 7 months. The previous best year we ever had in the history of Kentucky ever in a single year was $5.1 billion. We've shattered in half a year the best year we ever had, and we are still pursuing the Amazons and the Toyota Mazdas and others, but so are so many other people. And we may or may not get them, but we'll get some like them even if we don't get them. And you can bet I'm going to go down fighting trying to get both those and others beside. But I will say this. Who's going to work there? How are they going to be prepared? And what are you doing to make changes in an environment that even with that kind of upside growth in the economy, we are still financially constrained as a state into the foreseeable future? Which means we are going to have to do more with less, which means we are going to have to figure out how to not just simply do all the things we want to do, but perhaps do less of them. And in fact, I would challenge you as boards to look carefully at your universities and to work closely with your university presidents and find entire parts of your campus. This will be sacrilege to some that don't need to be there. either physically as programs, and there'll be 1,000 people, weeping and gnashing of teeth far and wide. Change will not come if you are not bold. We need change. For us to succeed, for us to be what we are capable of being, what we are on track to be, for us to succeed in attaining the vision of being the epicenter of engineering and manufacturing in America. It's going to require a degree of boldness and a degree of creativity and a degree of efficiency from all of you, the likes of which I would bet most of you have never had to apply anywhere in anything that touches the public sector, certainly. Some of you have had to do this very same thing in the private sector. Bring that thinking. We cannot afford to do otherwise. We're going to get this done. We're going to succeed. We're going to lead the nation. We will be the answer that's given when that question is asked a generation from now, because we are Kentucky. Thank you.